The espresso machine hissed behind me, releasing steam that carried the bitter scent of over-extracted coffee into the already stale air of the 43rd floor. I didn't look up from the expense report I was reconciling, my fingers moving across the keyboard with the mechanical precision of someone who'd performed this task exactly 217 times before. The numbers had to balance. They always had to balance, especially in Lorenzo Greco's world, where a misplaced decimal could mean more than just an accounting error. My desk sat outside his office like a sentinel post, positioned so I could see everyone who approached while maintaining what he called appropriate professional distance from the actual dealings that happened behind those heavy mahogany doors. 2 years I'd worked here. 730 days of arriving at 6:45 a.m., of preparing his coffee exactly as he preferred it. Double espresso, no sugar, in the specific Italian ceramic cup his grandmother had given him. Of managing a calendar that looked innocuous on the surface, but concealed meetings I'd learned not to ask about. The marble floor was cold, even through my sensible heels, the kind I'd chosen because they didn't click too loudly when I walked. Everything about this job required a specific calibration of presence, visible enough to be efficient, invisible enough to be trusted. I'd mastered that balance through careful observation, watching how Angelo, Lorenzo's second-in-command, moved through the space with quiet authority, how Claudio, the head of security, could clear a room with nothing but a slight shift in posture. "Julia." Lorenzo's voice came through the intercom, that particular tone he used when he was about to request something he knew would complicate my morning. "The Santoro contract. Where are we on the final revisions?" I pressed the button, keeping my voice level. "Already on your desk, left side, under the property assessments." I highlighted the 3 clauses that conflict with the maritime regulations you mentioned last week. Silence. Then, "You remembered that conversation?" "I remember all our conversations, Mr. Greco. That's what you pay me for." A sound that might have been amusement filtered through the speaker. "Among other things. Come in, please." I gathered the expense report and the Santoro file, smoothing my navy dress, professional, modest, forgettable, before entering his office. The room always felt colder than the rest of the floor, as if the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city somehow drew in winter even during summer. Lorenzo stood with his back to me, his charcoal suit fitted with the kind of tailoring that whispered rather than shouted wealth. His dark hair was slightly longer than corporate standard, curling just at his collar, in a way that suggested he had more important things to worry about than haircuts. "The maritime clauses," he said without turning. "Explain your thinking." This was a test. He did this sometimes, questioning decisions I'd already made correctly, watching to see if I'd doubt myself or defend my position. I'd learned to do the latter. Clause 7 assumes goods can be transferred at any port of entry, but the new regulations specify that certain classifications require pre-clearance at designated facilities. If Santoro's shipments fall into those classifications, which, based on the inventory descriptions, they do, then the current language leaves us exposed to customs delays or worse. "Worse," he repeated, finally turning to face me. His gray eyes held that particular intensity that made junior associates stumble over their words. I'd stopped stumbling after month 3, define worse in this context. Seizure of goods, investigation of shipping practices, unwanted attention from authorities who might start asking questions about other shipments. I met his gaze steadily. I assume we prefer to avoid all 3. Something shifted in his expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition. "We do. Adjust the language accordingly and have it ready for Santoro's review by 3 p.m. Already drafted. The revised version is in the folder, tabbed in green." This time the almost smile reached his eyes. "Efficient as always, Miss Romano." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. "The flowers that arrived this morning. In the lobby. The security log shows they're addressed to you." My hand tightened on the folder. I hadn't seen any delivery, Hadn't ordered anything. I'm not expecting any flowers, Mr. Greco. Nevertheless, they're waiting at the front desk. Red roses. Quite an elaborate arrangement. His tone had gone carefully neutral, which somehow made it more loaded. An admirer? Heat crept up my neck, but I kept my voice professional. If so, they're confused. I don't have admirers. Everyone has admirers, Miss Romano. Some are simply more persistent than others. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. I returned to my desk, the expense report suddenly seeming less important than the mystery of who would send me flowers at work. The morning proceeded normally. Calls to schedule, documents to file, a minor crisis with the building's HVAC system that I resolved with 3 phone calls and a carefully worded email to the property manager. It wasn't until lunch that Chiara, who worked in legal 2 floors down, appeared at my desk with barely contained excitement. Julia, did you see them? Everyone's talking about the roses in the lobby. They're gorgeous. Who sent them? I have no idea. I minimized the spreadsheet I'd been working on. There's no card? Oh, there's a card. Very mysterious. It just says, "For the woman who makes every day brighter." No signature. Chiara leaned closer, lowering her voice. Do you think it's from him? Him who? She gestured toward Lorenzo's office with her eyes. You know? The boss. I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. He looks at me like I'm a competent employee who occasionally doesn't anticipate every possible disaster before it happens, I said firmly, ignoring the flutter in my chest that her words caused. That's called normal professional interaction. Normal professional interaction doesn't involve checking if you're wearing your seatbelt every time you leave in a company car, or personally reviewing the background checks of every new security guard assigned to this floor. Or, Chiara, I kept my voice low but firm. Stop. He's my boss. I'm his assistant. There's nothing else to discuss. But as she left, I couldn't stop thinking about those roses. Red roses. The traditional declaration, the obvious choice for someone trying to make a statement. I thought of Lorenzo's careful neutrality when he'd mentioned them, the way his jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly. The afternoon proceeded with unusual tension. Lorenzo called me into his office 3 times for matters that could have been handled via email. Each time, I felt his gaze tracking my movements with an attention that went beyond professional assessment. When Angelo arrived for their 4 o'clock meeting, I heard Lorenzo's voice through the door, sharper than usual, discussing security protocols and potential vulnerabilities. At 5:30, as I was preparing to leave, Claudio appeared at my desk. Miss Romano, Mr. Greco has asked that you take the flowers home with you. I'll have them brought to your car. That's not necessary. They can stay in the lobby. I'm sure they brighten the space. Claudio's expression didn't change. Mr. Greco was quite specific. He wants them removed from the building. Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. I nodded slowly, gathering my things, and when I reached the lobby, the roses were already waiting by the security desk. They were spectacular. At least 3 dozen stems, deep crimson, arranged with obvious skill and expense. As I approached, Lorenzo emerged from the private elevator, his presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the space. He walked directly to the flowers, his face carved from stone. Throw them out, he said quietly, his voice carrying nonetheless. Now. The security guard hesitated. Sir, they're addressed to... I don't care who they're addressed to. Throw them out. Heat flooded through me. Embarrassment, confusion, and something sharper. Anger. I set down my bag carefully, my heart hammering, but I forced my voice to remain steady. With respect, Mr. Greco, they're my flowers. If anyone's throwing them out, it should be me. He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gray eyes was nothing I'd seen before. Not professional assessment, not casual interest. Something raw and barely controlled. You want to keep gifts from strangers? I want to make my own decisions about what I keep or discard. I took a step closer, aware of every eye in the lobby fixed on us. And I want to know why you care. The silence stretched. Then Lorenzo moved, closing the distance between us until I could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker, more complex, until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Because, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You work for me. Everything that happens to you while you're in this building is my concern. Your safety is my responsibility. And I don't appreciate anonymous gifts sent to my employees without proper vetting. This isn't about safety. The words escaped before I could stop them, bold and reckless. This is about something else entirely. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might actually answer, might give voice to whatever was burning in his eyes. Instead, he stepped back, his expression closing like a door slamming shut. Claudio, have the flowers sent to Miss Romano's apartment, and run a full background check on the sender. I want to know who thinks they can send gifts to my assistant without going through proper channels. He walked away, his footsteps echoing on the marble, leaving me standing amid a lobby full of staring witnesses. As Claudio carefully gathered the roses, I caught his eye. This is insane, I murmured. Claudio replied quietly. Is Mr. Greco being remarkably restrained? You should see him when he's actually angry. I rode home in the company car, another Lorenzo mandate I'd stopped arguing about, with the roses filling the back seat with their heavy perfume. My apartment was small, a studio in a respectable but unremarkable neighborhood, and the flowers looked absurd on my tiny kitchen counter, like something from another world trying to colonize mine. I found the card tucked among the stems, the handwriting elegant but unfamiliar. For the woman who makes every day brighter. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hope you liked the roses. I've been watching you for some time now, and I thought it was time to make myself known. A chill ran through me, watching me. I thought of Lorenzo's immediate suspicion, his demand to have the sender investigated. Had he known somehow? Was this the kind of threat he dealt with regularly? The reason he insisted on security protocols and background checks? Another text arrived. Don't worry, my intentions are entirely honorable. I'd like to take you to dinner. Saturday night. I'll send a car. I stared at the message, my mind racing. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a coworker with a crush, or someone I'd met at a coffee shop. This was calculated, informed, deliberate. Someone who knew where I worked, who could afford elaborate flower arrangements and car services, who felt confident enough to announce they'd been watching me. My phone rang. Lorenzo's private number, the one he'd given me for emergencies. Mr. Greco? Did you receive any other communications? No preamble. His voice tight with something I couldn't name. Text messages, 2. They're signed M. Forward them to me immediately. Don't respond. Don't delete them. And Julia. His use of my first name sent a shock through my system. Lock your door. Check your windows. I'm sending Claudio to your building. That's not necessary. It is necessary. Do as I say. He hung up. I forwarded the messages, my hand slightly unsteady, and went to check my door. Already locked. Windows secure. I lived on the 4th floor. No fire escape access. But the fact that I was checking, that Lorenzo's urgency had transmitted to me so completely, told me this was more than jealousy or overprotection. This was danger wearing the mask of romance. And somehow, without knowing how or why, I'd become the center of a game I didn't understand, caught between Lorenzo's fierce protection and a stranger's calculated attention. The roses filled my apartment with their heavy scent, beautiful and ominous, a promise and a threat wrapped in crimson petals. My phone buzzed again. Lorenzo, don't go to work tomorrow. Stay home. We need to talk. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. In 2 years, he'd never asked me to stay home. Never suggested that the office wasn't safe. Whatever this was, it was serious enough to break every protocol we'd established. I typed back, I'll be there, 6:45, like always. His response came immediately. Julia, for once in your stubborn life, do as you're told. I smiled despite myself, despite the fear curling in my stomach. Not a chance, Mr. Greco. See you tomorrow. Because whatever was happening, whatever danger this mysterious M represented, I wasn't going to hide. I was going to understand. And something told me that understanding started with finally seeing what lay beneath Lorenzo's carefully maintained professional distance. The truth he'd been hiding behind orders and protocols, and that fierce, barely controlled intensity I'd glimpsed in the lobby. The roses seemed to watch me from the counter, their dark beauty suddenly sinister. Tomorrow I'd get answers. Tomorrow, everything would change. I just didn't know yet how much. I arrived at 6:45 exactly, the way I had for 731 days. The lobby was different, though. More security guards, their positions strategic rather than decorative. Claudio met me at the entrance, his expression unreadable. Miss Romano, Mr. Greco is expecting you. Top floor, private conference room. Not his office. The private conference room was where he held meetings that required absolute discretion, soundproofed and electronically shielded. I'd only been inside twice, both times to deliver urgent documents. Lorenzo stood by the windows when I entered, his back to me, hands clasped behind him in a posture I'd learned meant he was containing something volatile. On the table lay a folder, thick with documents. "Close the door," he said without turning. I did, the heavy click seeming louder than it should. The roses were sent by Marco Colombo. He turned to face me, and I saw shadows under his eyes, suggesting he'd slept poorly or not at all. Does that name mean anything to you? No. Should it? His father is Giuseppe Colombo. They run shipping operations throughout the Mediterranean. Legitimate on the surface, but... He gestured vaguely. Giuseppe and I have a complicated history. 3 years ago, we were negotiating a territorial agreement. It fell apart. Badly. And his son is sending me flowers because... Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Because he's been watching you for approximately 6 months. He's visited the coffee shop you frequent on Tuesday mornings. He's been at the same gym 3 times when you've attended evening classes. He sits 2 tables away at the restaurant where you have lunch with Chiara on Fridays. Ice flooded through me. How do you know all this? Because I've been watching him watch you. He said it flatly, as if surveillance was perfectly normal. Since September, when I noticed him at a charity gala where you were volunteering. He asked about you. Too many questions. Too specific. My legs felt unsteady. I gripped the back of a chair. You've been following me? I've been protecting you. There's a difference. He moved closer, his gray eyes intense. Marco Colombo doesn't do anything without a purpose, Julia. He doesn't send flowers to beautiful women just because they catch his eye. He's calculated, strategic, and his interest in you started shortly after you began processing some very sensitive shipping contracts. Understanding dawned, cold and sharp. You think he's using me to get information about your operations. I know he is. What I don't know is how much you've already told him. The accusation hit like a physical blow. I haven't told him anything because I've never spoken to him. I didn't even know his name until 2 minutes ago. Lorenzo studied me with that unnerving intensity, looking for tells, for signs of deception. I held his gaze, letting him see the hurt beneath my anger. I believe you, he said finally. But he doesn't know that I know about him yet, which means he'll try again. more aggressively this time. Then I'll tell him I'm not interested. You'll do exactly what he expects. Lorenzo opened the folder, spreading photographs across the table. Marco at the coffee shop, Marco at the gym, Marco outside my apartment building. You'll respond to his dinner invitation. You'll go. Excuse me? With appropriate security, of course, wired, monitored. You'll let him think his approach is working while we gather information about what he's really after. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. You want me to spy on him. I want you to help me protect what I've built. What we've built together. He moved around the table until we were separated by mere inches. You've been part of this organization for 2 years, Julia. You think you're just an assistant, but you know things that could destroy me if they reached the wrong ears. You've seen contracts, scheduled meetings, processed payments that tell stories I'd prefer stayed buried. I know you haven't. You're loyal, discreet. That's why you're still here. That's why you're the only assistant I've kept longer than 6 months. His voice dropped lower. But Marco doesn't know that. He thinks you're just a pretty face with access. He'll try to charm you, seduce you, extract information piece by piece until he has enough to move against me. Unless we move first. My heart hammered against my ribs. And if I refuse, then I find another way to handle Marco Colombo, a more permanent way, which would be unfortunate, because despite our differences, I prefer not to start wars with rival families when diplomacy might suffice. He paused. But make no mistake, I will handle him, one way or another. The unspoken threat hung between us. I thought of the rumors about Lorenzo Greco, the whispers about rivals who disappeared, about problems that got solved with terrifying efficiency. I'd never wanted to believe them. Had told myself that his business might operate in gray areas, but surely not. You're scaring me, I said quietly. Something shifted in his expression, the hardness fracturing slightly. Good. You should be scared. Not of me. Never of me. But of men like Marco who see you as a tool, a means to an end. Who would use you and discard you without a second thought. And you're different because I actually care what happens to you. The words came out rough, as if dragged from somewhere he'd tried to keep locked. Because the thought of him touching you, speaking to you, being in the same room with you makes me want to. He cut himself off, turning away sharply. Forget I said that. But I couldn't forget it. Those words hung in the air, reshaping everything I thought I understood about our professional relationship, about his overprotective protocols and careful distance. Mr. Greco. Lorenzo. He spoke without turning back. When it's just us, call me Lorenzo. I think we're past formalities now. Lorenzo. His name felt strange on my tongue, intimate. If I do this, if I meet with Marco, I have conditions. He turned back, surprise flickering across his features. Conditions. You tell me everything. No more half-truths, no more need-to-know protocols. If I'm walking into danger, I deserve to know exactly what I'm dealing with. I straightened my spine, channeling every ounce of courage I possessed. And after this is over, we talk, really talk, about what you just said, about what this actually is between us. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, barely masked, but definitely there. Agreed, he said finally, to both conditions. The next 3 days were a crash course in a world I'd only glimpsed from the periphery. Angelo briefed me on the Colombo family history, their connections, their methods. Claudio taught me how to wear a wire without it being detectable, how to subtly signal if I felt threatened, how to position myself in restaurants to give my security team clear sightlines. Lorenzo watched it all with barely contained tension, interrupting constantly with additional scenarios, backup plans, contingencies upon contingencies. On the third night, after everyone else had left, he found me in the conference room, studying surveillance photos of Marco. "You don't have to do this," he said from the doorway. "I can find another way. Your other way ends with someone getting hurt, possibly killed." I set down the photo. "This is cleaner, safer, smarter." "Nothing about this is safe." He entered the room, closing the door behind him. "I'm sending you to dinner with a man who wants to use you against me. That's not safe, Julia. That's calculated risk. You've been taking calculated risks your entire life." "Yes, with my own safety. My own life." He stopped across the table from me, his hands flat on the polished surface. "Not with yours. Never with yours." "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Why do I matter so much? The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then Lorenzo straightened, his expression closing. "Because you're valuable to my organization. Because replacing you would be..." "Don't." I stood, matching his position across the table. "Don't hide behind professional justifications. Not after what you said 3 days ago. Not after all of this." I gestured at the surveillance photos, the security protocols, the elaborate plan to protect information that could have been secured by simply firing me and hiring someone new. "You don't do all this for an employee, so tell me the truth. Why?" His hands clenched into fists on the table. "You want the truth? Fine. You walk into my office every morning at 6:45, and for exactly 3 minutes before the chaos starts, everything feels quieter, manageable. You anticipate problems before they develop. You question my decisions when they're wrong. You're not afraid of me, which is either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, and I still haven't decided which." He moved around the table, and I forced myself not to step back as he approached. "You drink your coffee with too much sugar and not enough milk. You tap your pen twice against your desk when you're concentrating. You say, 'with respect,' right before you're about to completely ignore what I've asked you to do. You've worn the same navy dress 7 times this month because it has pockets deep enough for your phone and 3 pens, which you consider essential." He stopped directly in front of me. "And somewhere in the last 2 years, you became the one thing in my life I'm not willing to lose. So yes, Julia, you matter. More than is probably wise. More than I should allow." My breath caught. "Lorenzo, but that's exactly why you can't do this." His voice turned harsh, defensive. "Because I'm compromised. Because I can't think strategically when you're involved. Because Marco Colombo sending you roses made me want to burn down everything he's built, and that's not rational. That's not safe. That's..." I kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. I simply closed the distance between us and pressed my lips to his, cutting off his spiral of self-recrimination with direct action. For one heartbeat, he froze. Then his hands came up to frame my face, gentle despite the intensity I could feel vibrating through him, and he kissed me back with 2 years of restraint finally breaking free. When we pulled apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "That was incredibly unprofessional," he murmured. "I don't care. I'm your employer. There are power dynamics, ethical concerns. Still don't care." A rough laugh escaped him. "You should. I'm not a good man, Julia. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I operate in a world where violence is currency, and loyalty is purchased with fear as often as respect. You deserve better than this. Better than me." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I'm not interested in what I deserve. I'm interested in what I want. And apparently, I want my dangerously overprotective boss who tracks my coffee preferences and considers flowers from strangers a declaration of war. He's not just a stranger. I know who he is. I know what this is. And I'm still going to that dinner, Lorenzo. Not because you're ordering me to, but because it's the smart play. Because it protects what you've built, what we've built together. Because I understand now what's at stake. His jaw tightened. And after we figure out what this is, what we are. If you're willing, if I'm willing. He made a sound between a laugh and a growl. Julia, I've been willing since approximately month 4, when you corrected my Italian grammar in front of Giuseppe Santoro, and he laughed so hard he agreed to terms he'd been fighting for weeks. I've been willing since the first time you challenged me instead of cowering. I've just been smart enough to know that willing and wise are different things. Maybe it's time to stop being quite so smart. He kissed me again, slower this time, deliberate. When we broke apart, his expression had shifted into something I recognized. Strategic Lorenzo, the man who negotiated impossible deals and navigated dangerous waters. Saturday night, Marco will send a car. Claudio will be in a vehicle 3 cars back. Angelo will be in the restaurant, posing as a diner. I'll be somewhere close by, trying not to commit murder. I smiled slightly. I know how this works. Do you? His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing my skin. Do you understand that if he touches you, if he threatens you, if he makes one wrong move, there will be consequences? That I won't be rational or measured? That I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe? Diplomatic implications be damned. I understand that you care about me. That's enough. It's not enough. It's dangerous and complicated and that's the truth we're working with. I caught his hand, holding it against my face. So let's work with it. Together. The way we've been doing for 2 years, except now we're honest about what's underneath the professional facade. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together. But Julia, if at any point on Saturday you feel unsafe, if anything feels wrong, you signal Claudio immediately. Promise me. I promise. And no unnecessary risks, no trying to be brave. No, Lorenzo, I squeezed his hand. I'm going to dinner with a man who wants to use me. I'm not going to war. Trust me to handle this. I do trust you. It's Marco Colombo I don't trust. He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me in an embrace that felt both protective and possessive. 3 more days. Then we end this threat and figure out what comes next. I rested my head against his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady and strong, and tried not to think about all the ways Saturday could go wrong. Tried not to acknowledge the fear coiling in my stomach beneath the determination. 3 days until I sat across from a stranger who'd been watching me, who wanted to use my access to destroy the man I'd just kissed. 3 days to prepare for a performance that needed to be perfect. 3 days until everything changed again. The memory came unbidden as I fastened diamond earrings Lorenzo had insisted I wear. Borrowed from some collection he had access to, probably worth more than my yearly salary. 2 years ago, my first week on the job, I'd made a mistake. A small one, switching 2 meeting times in Lorenzo's calendar. It had caused a cascade of problems, forcing him to reschedule with a very important client. I'd expected to be fired. Instead, Lorenzo had called me into his office, closed the door, and asked me to explain what happened. Not angry, curious, wanting to understand the thought process that led to the error. I was trying to optimize your schedule, I'd said, my voice steady despite my fear. The earlier meeting was closer to the office. I thought it would save time. Did you check whether the earlier meeting time worked for the client? No, I assumed. Assumption is the enemy of precision, Miss Romano. But he'd said it gently, like a teacher correcting a student he believed in. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to spend the next week shadowing Angelo. Learn how information flows in this organization. Learn what questions to ask before making unilateral decisions. Then we'll try again. No screaming, no humiliation. Just pragmatic problem solving and an unexpected investment in my development. That had been my first glimpse of the man beneath the reputation. Someone who valued loyalty and competence enough to teach rather than simply replace. Now, standing in my apartment in a black dress that cost more than my monthly rent, another Lorenzo provision, delivered that morning with a note. He expects elegance. Let's not disappoint. I wondered if I'd misread everything. If the man who'd kissed me 3 days ago and the one who'd patiently trained me 2 years ago were carefully constructed facades hiding something darker. My phone buzzed. Lorenzo. Car is approaching. Angelo is already at the restaurant. Claudio will follow at a distance. Remember, you're curious, flattered, but cautious. He needs to work for your trust. I texted back, and if he asks about you, tell him the truth, that I'm a demanding boss who pays well and keeps appropriate professional distance. Don't oversell it. Marco will smell a lie. The car arrived exactly at 7, a sleek black sedan with a driver who opened my door with practiced courtesy. As we pulled away from my building, I caught a glimpse of Claudio's SUV 3 cars back, just as promised. The restaurant was in the financial district, the kind of place that didn't advertise because everyone who mattered already knew about it. The maitre d' greeted me by name, Miss Romano, right this way, and led me through a dining room of soft lighting and quiet conversations to a private corner table. Marco Colombo stood as I approached, and I understood immediately why Lorenzo had been concerned. He was handsome in a calculated way. Tailored suit, easy smile, dark hair styled with just enough artful dishevelment to seem approachable. Nothing threatening. Everything designed to disarm. Julia. He took my hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture that might have been charming if I didn't know what Lorenzo had told me. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I was worried my approach might have been too forward. It was definitely direct. I took my seat, accepting the wine menu he offered. I'm still not entirely sure why I'm here. Curiosity? Intrigue? His smile widened. Or maybe you're as tired of the mundane as I am, and the prospect of an evening with someone new seemed appealing. The mundane. I repeated the word, watching his expression. Is that what you think my life is? I think you're wasted as Lorenzo Greco's assistant. He said it casually, but I saw the calculation beneath. Someone with your intelligence, your efficiency, your attention to detail, you could be running your own operation, not managing someone else's calendar. You seem to know a lot about my efficiency. I'm an observant man, and you're worth observing. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me, do you enjoy working for Greco? Or is it simply the best option available? The wine arrived, giving me a moment to consider my response. This was it. The opening, the first gentle probe to see if I was receptive to being turned. I thought of Lorenzo's instructions. Curious, flattered, but cautious. He's brilliant but difficult, I said, choosing words carefully. The work is challenging. The hours are demanding, but I learn something every day, which is more than I could say about most jobs. Learning is valuable, but so is appreciation, recognition. Marco's dark eyes held mine. Does Greco appreciate what you do for him? I thought of Lorenzo's kiss, his confession, the way he'd said I mattered more than was wise. But Marco couldn't know about any of that. To him, I was supposed to be an undervalued employee, potentially resentful, possibly vulnerable to outside interest. He pays well, I said neutrally. And he's fair, in his way. Fair. Marco laughed softly. That's damning with faint praise if I ever heard it. You deserve more than fair, Julia. You deserve exceptional. The waiter appeared to take our orders, and I used the interruption to glance subtly around the restaurant. Angelo sat 2 tables away, engrossed in his own meal, apparently paying no attention to us. I knew better. Every word we spoke was being recorded, analyzed, catalogued. Tell me about yourself, I said once the waiter left. The roses said you'd been watching me. but I don't know anything about you beyond your name and your taste in flowers." "Fair enough." He settled back in his chair, comfortable, confident. "I run my family's shipping operations. We handle logistics for various clients throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. It's lucrative, but often tedious. Lots of paperwork, regulations, customs protocols. Not unlike what you do for Greco, I imagine. Probably more complex than anything I handle." "I doubt that. From what I understand, Greco's operations require someone with exceptional organizational skills and discretion." His tone remained light, but I heard the emphasis on discretion. The kind of person who knows when to ask questions and when to simply execute instructions without needing all the context. My skin prickled. This was it, the real approach, hidden beneath layers of flattery and seemingly casual conversation. He was testing whether I was the type to follow orders blindly, or someone who paid attention, who understood implications, who might have information worth extracting. "Context is important in my work," I said carefully. "I can't anticipate problems if I don't understand the bigger picture. Mr. Greco values proactive thinking over blind obedience." "Does he?" Marco's expression sharpened slightly. "That's interesting. Most men in his position prefer employees who don't ask too many questions. Less liability that way. Maybe that's why so many of them make preventable mistakes." He laughed, genuine amusement crossing his face. "Brilliant and brave. No wonder he keeps you close." The word close hung between us, weighted with implication. I took a sip of wine, buying time, remembering Lorenzo's warning about Marco's patience, his strategy. "How close is close?" Marco asked, confirming my suspicion. "The professional world is full of rumors about Lorenzo Greco. Some say he's a solitary figure, trusting no one. Others suggest he has a very small circle of loyalty. I'm curious which category his executive assistant falls into." This was dangerous territory. Deny being in Lorenzo's inner circle, and I seemed like I had no valuable access. Confirm it too readily, and Marco would know I was being deliberately obtuse. "I organize his schedule and manage his communications," I said, which was technically true, and completely uninformative. "That requires a certain level of trust, but I wouldn't presume to call myself part of his inner circle. That's reserved for people like Angelo Ricci and his security chief." "Ah, but those men are enforcers, soldiers. You're different. You see everything that crosses his desk, every meeting he takes, every decision he weighs. That's not just trust, Julia. That's intimacy of a different kind. The intimacy of shared secrets." My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my expression neutral, even slightly puzzled. "You seem very interested in my employer's operations, Marco. Is there a reason?" "Only that I'm interested in you, and you come as a package with your work. I can hardly get to know you without understanding what occupies most of your waking hours." He paused as our appetizers arrived. "Unless I'm misreading this, and you'd prefer to keep your professional and personal lives completely separate." "I would, actually. I find that boundaries are important." I met his gaze directly. "Speaking of which, I'm still trying to understand why you sent roses to my workplace, instead of simply approaching me at the coffee shop or the gym. Why the grand gesture?" For the first time, his smooth facade flickered. Just for a moment, I saw calculation replace charm, and I understood that Lorenzo had been right. Everything Marco did was strategic, including this dinner, including his interest in me. "I wanted to make an impression," he said, recovering quickly. "Beautiful women receive casual compliments all the time. I needed you to notice me specifically." Mission accomplished, although you could have simply introduced yourself like a normal person. "Where's the romance in that?" His smile returned, but something had shifted. He knew I was more perceptive than he'd anticipated, less easily manipulated. "Besides, I learned long ago that the direct approach doesn't always work with intelligent women. They appreciate effort, Strategy. Or they appreciate honesty, I countered, which you haven't really offered yet. You've told me about your shipping business and your appreciation for grand gestures, but not why you've been watching me for 6 months. Not what you really want. The silence stretched between us, tension building. Then Marco laughed, but it sounded different now. Less charming, more genuine. You're right. I haven't been entirely honest. Would you like the truth? I'd prefer it to whatever performance this has been. He set down his fork, leaning forward with sudden intensity. Fine. The truth is that I noticed you 6 months ago at a charity gala. You were volunteering, organizing donors, and I watched you manage a complicated situation with grace and efficiency. Then I learned you worked for Lorenzo Greco, and I became very interested indeed. Because you want information about his operations. Because I want to understand the man who nearly destroyed my family 3 years ago. His voice hardened. Your boss and my father had a business arrangement that fell apart. Badly. People were hurt. Relationships were severed. My father spent 2 years rebuilding what Lorenzo Greco took from him in a single decision. I processed this, comparing it to what Lorenzo had told me. Complicated history, he'd said. Territorial agreement that fell apart. But Marco's version painted Lorenzo as the aggressor, the one who'd caused damage. And you think I can help you? What? Get revenge. I think you can help me understand whether Lorenzo Greco is someone worth doing business with again, or someone my family should actively work against. Marco's dark eyes held mine. You see him every day. You know how he operates, how he treats people, whether his word means anything. That information has value, Julia, and I'm willing to compensate you for it. There it was, the real offer, finally on the table. Not romance, not genuine interest, just transactional information exchange disguised as courtship. You want to pay me to betray my employer's trust. I want to pay you for insights into a man who wields enormous power with very little oversight. Think of it as industrial intelligence. Perfectly legal, entirely professional. He gestured dismissively. What you do with the money is your business. I just want to know if Lorenzo Greco is a man worth trusting or a threat that needs to be contained. My stomach turned, but I maintained my expression. Thoughtful, considering, as if his offer had genuine appeal instead of confirming every warning Lorenzo had given me. That's a generous offer, I said slowly. But I'm going to need time to think about it. This isn't something I can decide over appetizers. Of course. Take all the time you need. Marco's smile returned, satisfied. He thought he'd won, that my hesitation meant consideration rather than revulsion. I'm not going anywhere. And neither, I suspect, is your frustration with being undervalued by a man who takes your loyalty for granted. The rest of the dinner passed in surface pleasantries, Marco carefully building rapport while I played the part of someone genuinely conflicted. By the time dessert arrived, I'd extracted enough information to confirm Lorenzo's suspicions. Marco wanted detailed intelligence about shipping routes, customs protocols, and most importantly, the names of Lorenzo's contacts in various port authorities. In the car ride home, I kept my expression neutral, knowing the driver reported to Marco. Only when I finally reached my apartment, door locked behind me, did I allow myself to shake. My phone rang immediately. Lorenzo, are you okay? No preamble, just urgent concern. I'm fine. He made his offer, just like you said he would. Tell me everything. I recounted the conversation, every detail I could remember. Lorenzo listened without interrupting, and when I finished, I heard him exhale slowly. You handled it perfectly. Better than I hoped. He thinks you're considering his proposal. Which means he'll approach me again. Push harder. Yes. A pause. Julia, you can stop now. We have enough to prove his intentions. I can handle the rest. How? I asked. By starting the war you were trying to avoid? If necessary? Or we could finish this the smart way. I tell Marco I need proof he can be trusted, information about his own operations as good faith. We document everything. Then we have leverage to force his family to back off permanently without bloodshed. Silence on the other end. Then, that's dangerous. If he suspects you're working with me, he won't, because I'm good at my job, Lorenzo, and my job right now is protecting what we've built together. I paused. Unless you don't trust me to handle this, you know that's not the issue. Then what is? The issue is that I kissed you 3 days ago, and now I'm asking you to have dinner with a man who wants to use you. The issue is that every strategic instinct I have says your plan is brilliant, and every personal instinct I have says to lock you away somewhere safe until this is over. His voice roughened. The issue is that you matter, Julia, and men make stupid decisions about things that matter. My chest tightened. Then trust me to make smart decisions for both of us. Let me finish this. One more meeting, he said finally. You meet with Marco one more time, extract what we need, and then we shut this down. Agreed? Agreed. And Julia, when this is over, we talk. Really talk. About what this is, what we are, what comes next. No more delays, no more professional distance. Just truth. I look forward to it, I said softly. After we hung up, I stood in my dark apartment, still in the expensive dress, still wearing the borrowed earrings, and wondered when exactly my life had become so complicated. When I'd gone from organizing schedules to playing spy games with rival crime families. When my biggest concern had shifted from balancing budgets to balancing loyalty and survival. But I knew the answer. It had happened gradually, over 2 years of watching Lorenzo Greco build something extraordinary through sheer will and strategic brilliance, of learning that the world he operated in required different rules, different compromises, of falling for a man who was dangerous and protective and brilliant and damaged in equal measure. And now, standing in the aftermath of Marco Colombo's offer, I made a choice. Not because Lorenzo had asked, not even because it was smart strategy, but because somewhere in the last 2 years, Lorenzo's empire had become mine too. His enemies had become my concern. His survival had become essential to my own. Tomorrow, I'd call Marco. I'd play the game one more time. And then, when it was over, Lorenzo and I would figure out what came next. Together. The text from Marco arrived at 9:47 a.m., 3 days after our dinner. I've been thinking about our conversation. There's something I'd like to show you. Something that might help you make your decision. Are you free this evening? I stared at the message, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Lorenzo was in a meeting with Angelo and 3 men I didn't recognize. Serious faces, expensive suits, the kind of people who made even Claudio look slightly tense. I'd been instructed not to interrupt unless the building was actively on fire, but this felt important enough to risk his displeasure. I knocked once, opened the door a crack. Mr. Greco, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have an urgent communication that requires your immediate attention. He glanced up, irritation flickering across his face until he saw my expression. Then he understood. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me for just a moment. Angelo, continue with the logistics discussion. He followed me to my desk, his hand briefly touching the small of my back. A gesture so subtle that anyone watching would miss it, but I felt it like an electrical current. What is it? I showed him the text. His jaw tightened as he read it. He's escalating faster than I anticipated. This isn't good. Or it's good because it means he's confident, less cautious. Might reveal more than he intends. Or it's a trap. Lorenzo's voice went flat, dangerous. Julia, I don't like this. He wants to meet somewhere of his choosing, presumably somewhere he controls. That puts you at a disadvantage. So we adapt. I tell him I'm only available for a public meeting. Lunch tomorrow at the same restaurant. He considered this, clearly weighing options, calculating risks. Then his phone buzzed. Angelo, needing him back in the meeting. He glanced at it, frustration evident. Tonight, after you leave here, come to my apartment. We'll discuss this properly. Plan the next move with full security protocols. He paused. Don't respond to Marco until we've talked, please. The please surprised me. Lorenzo Greco didn't ask. He commanded. But when it came to me, something had shifted in the power dynamic between us. I wasn't just his employee anymore, following orders. I was something else. Something we hadn't defined yet, but both recognized. I'll be there at 7, I said. His fingers brushed mine briefly, another small gesture of connection, before he returned to his meeting, shoulders squared, face impassive, every inch the controlled leader. But I'd seen the flash of worry in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He was afraid. For me. The realization sent warmth and terror through me in equal measure. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Routine tasks felt trivial, when I knew that tonight I'd be in Lorenzo's private space, making decisions that could affect more than just the two of us. By 6:30, I'd changed into jeans and a simple sweater. My own clothes, not the professional armor I wore to work, and took a taxi to the address Lorenzo had texted me. His building was in the most expensive district of the city, all glass and steel and modern architecture that screamed wealth without vulgarity. The doorman knew my name before I could introduce myself. Miss Romano, of course. Mr. Greco is expecting you, penthouse elevator on your left. And within minutes I was stepping into an apartment that redefined luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights. Minimalist furniture in charcoal and cream created space rather than filling it. But what caught my attention wasn't the obvious wealth, it was the personal touches. Books stacked on a side table. A framed photograph of an older woman who had Lorenzo's eyes. A chess set mid-game, suggesting he played against himself when restless. "You're observing," Lorenzo said from behind me, his voice amused. He'd changed too. Dark slacks and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, casual in a way I'd never seen him. It made him seem younger, more approachable, though no less commanding. "Habit," I said. "You have good taste, less sterile than I expected." "What did you expect? A lair? Skulls mounted on the walls?" "Maybe not skulls, but definitely more overt displays of wealth." He moved to the kitchen, sleek, modern, expensive, and poured 2 glasses of wine. "My grandmother used to say that true wealth whispers, only insecurity shouts." He handed me a glass. She also said that intelligent women were the most dangerous kind, which means I should probably be more concerned about you than Marco Colombo. "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. She's also the only reason I'm not." He trailed off, setting down his wine untouched. "Never mind. We're not here to discuss my family history. We're here to figure out how to handle Marco's invitation." But I was curious now, filing away that unfinished sentence, that glimpse of vulnerability. "You were going to say she's the only reason you're not what? Not in prison? Not dead? Not like your father?" His gray eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw past every defense he'd constructed. All 3, probably. She saw something in me worth saving when I was 14, and heading down a very dark path. Made me promise I'd build something better than what my father had, still powerful, still protective of what was mine, but with lines I wouldn't cross. Rules, even in a world without many rules. "And have you kept that promise?" "Mostly." He moved closer, and I felt the air between us charged with that magnetic pull that had been building for weeks. The lines have gotten blurrier over time. Compromise becomes habit. But I've never hurt anyone who didn't threaten what I was protecting first. And I've never. He stopped again. Something painful crossing his expression. "Never what?" Never let myself care about someone the way I care about you. Because caring creates vulnerability. And vulnerability gets people killed in my world. His hand came up, cupping my face with unexpected gentleness. But apparently, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Because despite knowing all that, here we are. My heart hammered against my ribs. Here we are, I echoed softly. Which brings us to Marco. Lorenzo dropped his hand, stepping back, visibly forcing himself into strategic mode. His invitation tonight, he said he wants to show you something. That suggests he's prepared evidence of some kind. Possibly fabricated information about me, designed to make you doubt your loyalty. Or genuine intelligence about his own operations, testing whether I'm serious about betraying you. I moved to the windows, looking out at the city spread below. Either way, it's bait. The question is whether we take it, or force him to adjust his approach. What do you want to do? I turned to face him. I want to end this. Decisively, which means we need to make him believe I'm genuinely considering his offer, that I'm conflicted enough to need convincing. So I respond to his text. I agree to meet him tonight, but in a public space. A gallery opening that I know is happening because I processed the invitation for you last week. High visibility, lots of witnesses, impossible for him to try anything aggressive. Lorenzo considered this, his analytical mind clearly running through scenarios. The Castellano Gallery opening, contemporary art exhibition. It's invitation only, but I can get you on the list. And I'll be there, along with enough of my people that Marco will know he's being watched. He'll expect that, though. He'll expect you to be protective. Let him expect it. Let him understand that you're not unguarded, that any move against you has consequences. His voice turned cold, dangerous. I want Marco Colombo to understand exactly what kind of mistake he's making by targeting you. Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine, not fear of him, but recognition of what he was capable of when threatened. This was the man people whispered about, the one whose reputation kept rivals at bay. Lorenzo, I need you to promise me something. What? That you won't do anything you can't take back? That we handle this the smart way, not the violent way, that we're better than the reputation. I moved closer to him. Your grandmother wanted you to build something better. Let's honor that. For a long moment, he simply looked at me. Then he pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me in an embrace that felt both protective and possessive. You make me want to be better than I am, he said against my hair. That's either going to save me or destroy me. I'm not sure which yet. I'm betting on saving. His laugh was quiet, rough. That's because you don't know all of it yet. All the things I've done, the compromises I've made. When this is over, when Marco is handled, I'm going to tell you everything. And then you can decide if I'm actually worth the faith you're putting in me. I've already decided. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I've been deciding for 2 years, watching how you handle problems, how you treat people who work for you, how you balance power with principle. You're not perfect, Lorenzo, but you're trying. That matters. He kissed me then, and this time it wasn't the desperate breaking of restraint from 3 days ago. This was deliberate, thorough, a claiming and a promise wrapped together. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. After tonight, he murmured. After we handle Marco. After this threat is neutralized. I'm taking you away from all of this for a weekend. Somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. Just us, figuring out what comes next. That sounds perfect. It's necessary, because once we start this, once we're not just employer and assistant, once we're... He paused, searching for the right word. Together, I supplied. Once we're together. Together. He tested the word, then smiled slightly. Yes, once we're together openly, there will be consequences. Rivals will try to use you against me. Allies will question my judgment. The danger that already exists will multiply. You need to understand that, Julia. You need to choose this with full knowledge of what it means. I'm choosing it anyway. You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow too, and the day after, and every day until you believe me. I framed his face with my hands, forcing him to hold my gaze. I see you, Lorenzo. All of you. The brilliant strategist, the protective leader, the man trying to honor his grandmother's faith in him. And I'm choosing all of it. The danger, the complication, the beautiful mess of it. So stop trying to talk me out of it. Something in his expression cracked open. Relief and fear and hope mingled together. You're impossible. I'm determined. There's a difference. Is there? But he was smiling now, genuine warmth breaking through his usual control. Fine, you win. We do this your way, together. No more trying to protect you by pushing you away. But Julia, if at any point tonight things feel wrong, if Marco does anything that makes you uncomfortable, you signal immediately. Promise me. I promise. 2 hours later, I stood in the Castellano gallery wearing another borrowed dress. Deep green silk this time, elegant but not ostentatious, with Lorenzo's hand resting lightly on the small of my back as we moved through the crowd of art collectors and cultural elite. Marco was already there. I spotted him near a massive abstract canvas, and when our eyes met, his expression flickered with surprise before settling into pleased calculation. He thought I'd come alone. He thought I was here to accept his offer in a neutral public space. The presence of Lorenzo beside me disrupted whatever plan he'd constructed. Julia? Marco approached with that easy smile, though I saw the tension in his shoulders. What a pleasant surprise. I didn't realize you were interested in contemporary art. I'm interested in many things. I kept my voice pleasant, giving nothing away. Marco, this is my employer, Lorenzo Greco. Mr. Greco, this is Marco Colombo. We met recently for dinner. The two men assessed each other with the careful attention of rival predators recognizing a threat. Lorenzo's hand never left my back, a subtle but unmistakable claim of territory. Colombo. Lorenzo's voice was professionally neutral. I believe our fathers attempted to work together some years ago. Unfortunate that it didn't work out. Very unfortunate, Marco agreed, his dark eyes moving between us. Though I'm always interested in new arrangements, fresh perspectives. Perhaps over dinner the three of us could discuss potential opportunities for collaboration. Perhaps. Lorenzo's tone suggested absolutely not. Though I find that business discussions are best kept separate from social occasions, and tonight is definitely social. Julia was kind enough to accompany me to an event I would have otherwise skipped. She has excellent taste in art. The lie was smooth, delivered with just enough warmth to suggest we were more than just employer and assistant without explicitly stating it. I saw Marco process this new information, recalculating, his expression tightening slightly. I see. Marco's smile never wavered, but something cold entered his eyes. How fortunate for you, Greco, to have an assistant with such diverse interests and talents. One might even say she's indispensable. One might, Lorenzo agreed, if one wanted to be accurate. The tension between them was almost visible, two powerful men circling each other with superficial politeness, barely masking deeper hostility. I felt caught between them, a prize neither would acknowledge, but both clearly considered theirs to claim. Perhaps we could discuss that art piece, I interjected, gesturing toward the abstract canvas. I'd love to hear your interpretations. But neither man was truly interested in art anymore. Marco made his excuses shortly after, but not before catching my hand and pressing something into my palm, a business card with a phone number written on the back. Call me, he said quietly. "When you're ready to have a more private conversation, without supervision." After he left, Lorenzo and I stood in front of the painting, harsh blacks and reds slashed across white canvas, violent and beautiful simultaneously. "He gave you his direct number," Lorenzo said, his voice carefully controlled. "Yes." "Are you going to call it?" I looked up at him, at the man who'd protected me, trusted me, let me into his complicated world. "What do you think?" His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. "I think we just declared war without firing a shot, and I think Marco Colombo is about to discover that trying to use you against me was the biggest mistake of his life." "Good," I said, and meant it, because I was done being passive, done being the prize fought over by powerful men. It was time to remind them both that I had my own power, my own agency. And I chose to use it standing beside Lorenzo Greco, whatever consequences that choice might bring. Together, we'd finish this. Together, we'd build something better, starting tonight. The package arrived at my apartment 4 days after the gallery opening. No return address, just my name in elegant script that matched the handwriting from the roses. I knew before opening it what I'd find. Marco Colombo escalating his approach, pushing harder now that he'd seen me with Lorenzo. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note. "Information that might interest you about the man you're protecting. Call me when you're ready to discuss. The truth should matter, even to loyal employees." I stared at the drive, my stomach knotting. This was it, the fabricated evidence Lorenzo had warned me about, or possibly real information designed to make me doubt everything. Either way, it was a test. Marco wanted to see if I'd view the contents, if curiosity would override loyalty, if my relationship with Lorenzo was as solid as it had appeared at the gallery. I called Lorenzo immediately. He sent me something. "Don't open it. Don't even connect that drive to your computer." His voice was sharp, commanding. "I'm sending Claudio. He'll be there in 10 minutes. Pack a bag, enough for a few days. You're staying somewhere safer until we resolve this." "Lorenzo, I'm not running." "You're not running. You're being strategic. Marco just made a direct move against you in your own home. That means he knows where you live, probably has been watching your building. I'm not taking chances with your safety." 20 minutes later, I was in Claudio's SUV with a hastily packed bag, the thumb drive secured in an evidence bag, because apparently Lorenzo had protocols for everything. We didn't go to Lorenzo's penthouse as I'd expected. Instead, Claudio drove to a nondescript building in a quiet neighborhood, using a key card to access an underground garage. "Safe house," he explained. "Mr. Greco has several throughout the city. This one is registered under a shell company, impossible to trace back to him. You'll be comfortable, and security monitors every access point." The apartment was smaller than Lorenzo's penthouse, but equally well appointed. Modern furniture, fully stocked kitchen, blackout curtains on every window. Angelo was already there, setting up some kind of technical equipment on the dining table. "Miss Romano." He nodded in greeting, all business. "Mr. Greco wants that drive analyzed before you're anywhere near it. Standard protocol when rival families send unsolicited information. Could be infected with tracking software or worse." "Worse how?" "Worst case? Opens a back door into any network it touches, allowing remote access to everything connected. We've seen it before. Someone sends apparently innocent files. The target opens them on their work computer, and suddenly, their entire digital infrastructure is compromised." Angelo's expression was grim. "Marco Colombo is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. This drive is dangerous until proven otherwise." I settled into the safe house's living room, feeling like a prisoner in a very comfortable cell. An hour later, Lorenzo arrived, his hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it. A stress tell I'd learned to recognize. "Are you okay?" He crossed to me immediately, his hands framing my face, tilting it to catch the light as if checking for injuries. I'm fine. Just frustrated. This feels like hiding. This is smart strategy. But his thumb stroked my cheekbones gently, at odds with his firm words. Marco escalated faster than I anticipated. Sending something directly to your home means he's either very confident or very desperate. Both options are dangerous. Angelo cleared his throat from across the room. Sir, we've isolated the drive's contents. You're going to want to see this. We gathered around the laptop Angelo had set up, its screen displaying a folder filled with documents and video files. Lorenzo's expression went carefully blank as Angelo opened the first file. Shipping manifest dated from 3 years ago, showing cargo movements between various Mediterranean ports. These are from the disputed territory period, Angelo said quietly, when we were negotiating with Giuseppe Colombo. Negotiating is generous, Lorenzo said, his voice flat. We were fighting for control of routes his family had monopolized for decades. Routes they used for both legitimate cargo and considerably less legitimate shipments. Angelo opened another file, photographs of meetings, timestamps showing dates I recognized from Lorenzo's calendar. Marco has been building a case against you, suggesting you sabotaged the original agreement deliberately, that you used information Giuseppe shared in good faith to undercut his operations. Did you? I asked quietly. Lorenzo turned to me, his gray eyes holding mine. Yes. The admission hung in the air between us. I'd known, theoretically, that Lorenzo operated in moral gray areas, but confronting specific evidence was different from accepting abstract concepts. Giuseppe Colombo was running weapons through civilian cargo, Lorenzo continued, his voice steady, using shipping routes that passed through areas where his family had political connections, knowing authorities wouldn't inspect too carefully. I discovered this 3 years ago during our negotiations. He wanted me to partner with him, provide additional distribution networks in exchange for a share of profits. You refused, I said, understanding dawning. I refused, and then systematically dismantled his operation, leaked information to the right authorities, applied pressure through my own political connections, made it too expensive for him to continue. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. It destroyed the business arrangement and created an enemy, but it also stopped weapons from reaching conflict zones where they'd kill civilians. So yes, Julia, I sabotaged Giuseppe Colombo deliberately, and I'd do it again. Angelo opened another file, more recent documents showing Marco's current operations, his attempts to rebuild what his father had lost. He's trying a different approach now. Cleaner, more sophisticated. But the core business is the same. He's facilitating movements of restricted cargo through apparently legitimate shipping channels. And he thinks I can help him, I said slowly, pieces connecting. Not just by providing information about your operations, but by potentially giving him access to your distribution networks, your contacts. If he could compromise me, make me complicit, then he'd have leverage, Lorenzo finished. Against both of us. You'd be connected to illegal activity, unable to testify or cooperate with authorities without incriminating yourself. And I'd be vulnerable through you, forced to negotiate or risk your exposure. The sophistication of Marco's plan became clear, not just corporate espionage, but a carefully constructed trap designed to entangle me so thoroughly that I'd have no choice but to cooperate. The thumb drive wasn't just information. It was documentation of alleged crimes, carefully curated to look like Lorenzo was the villain. What do we do? I asked. Lorenzo exchanged a look with Angelo, some silent communication passing between them. We turn it around. Use his own strategy against him. How? You call Marco. Tell him you viewed the contents. Tell him you're angry, disillusioned, ready to hear his offer more seriously. Lorenzo's expression was calculating now. The strategic mind I'd seen negotiate impossible deals fully engaged. You arranged to meet him somewhere we control. One of my restaurants, my hotel. Somewhere every word will be recorded, every offer documented. And then? Then we let him make his pitch. We let him explicitly offer payment for information, for access to my networks. We let him incriminate himself completely. Lorenzo's smile was cold. And then we give all of it, his approach, his offers, the evidence of his current operations, to a very specific federal prosecutor who's been looking for an excuse to investigate the Colombo family for years. You'd expose him to authorities? I was surprised. In Lorenzo's world, I'd assumed problems were handled differently, more directly, more permanently. Giuseppe Colombo's weapons dealing hurt innocent people. That crossed a line I won't forgive. But Marco is young, stupid, and desperate to restore his family's reputation. He deserves a chance to learn from his mistakes in a federal prison instead of a grave. Lorenzo's hand found mine. My grandmother's influence, remember? Lines I won't cross, even when dealing with enemies. Over the next 3 days, we planned meticulously. Angelo coached me on what to say, how to appear genuinely conflicted. Claudio set up surveillance in the restaurant where I'd meet Marco, ensuring every angle would be covered. And Lorenzo watched it all with barely contained tension, his control fraying at the edges. "You don't have to do this," he said the night before the meeting, finding me alone in the safe house kitchen at 2 a.m., both of us unable to sleep. "We can find another way." There is no other way. Not one that ends this cleanly. I turned from the window where I'd been watching the empty street below. Marco won't stop until he's forced to. This forces him. By putting you in a room with a man who wants to use you. Lorenzo closed the distance between us. Do you understand how much I hate that? How every instinct I have is screaming to find a different solution? I understand. But I also understand that sometimes the only way out is through. I reached up, cupping his face. Trust me. Trust us. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me with almost desperate intensity. When this is over, we're going away. Just like I promised. Somewhere far from all of this, where we can just be together without threats and strategies and rival families. I'm going to hold you to that. Good. Because I'm going to hold you. For an entire weekend. Possibly longer. His hand stroked through my hair. And then we figure out what comes next. How to navigate this, us, in a world that doesn't make it easy. Nothing worth having is easy. No, he agreed quietly. It's not. The next evening, I sat across from Marco Colombo in a private dining room at Lorenzo's most elegant restaurant. Claudio stood outside the door, ostensibly for our privacy, but actually for my protection. Cameras hidden in decorative fixtures captured every word, every gesture. Marco looked confident, pleased that I'd finally reached out. I'm glad you called, Julia. I was beginning to think you'd chosen blind loyalty over informed decision-making. I chose to investigate before making judgments, I said carefully. The information on that drive was illuminating. Disturbing, I'd imagine, discovering that the man you've worked for isn't who you thought he was. Marco leaned forward, his expression sympathetic. Lorenzo Greco presents himself as a legitimate businessman, but the evidence shows something darker. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? That depends on what you're offering in exchange for my cooperation. His smile widened, direct. I appreciate that. Here's what I propose. You provide me with specific information. Shipping schedules, contact names, routing protocols that Greco uses for his more sensitive cargo. In exchange, I'll pay you $50, $0 immediately, with another $50, $0 upon successful implementation of the information. $100,000 to betray my employer's trust. $100,000 to correct a moral wrong. to help dismantle an operation that has caused significant harm. He was good, I had to admit, framing it as justice rather than betrayal. Think about what you could do with that money, Julia. Start your own business. Leave this world behind. Build something legitimate. And if I refuse? His expression hardened slightly. Then I'd have to question what kind of person knowingly enables illegal activity. The kind of person who might find themselves implicated when authorities eventually investigate. And they will investigate, Julia. It's only a matter of time before Lorenzo Greco's operations attract unwanted official attention. There it was, the threat wrapped in concern, the implicit blackmail beneath the generous offer. Marco had shown his entire hand, incriminated himself completely, all captured on multiple cameras with perfect audio quality. I stood slowly, my hands shaking, but not from fear, from anger at how he'd tried to manipulate me, how he'd underestimated both my intelligence and my loyalty. I think we're done here, Marco. We're done when I say. The door opened. Lorenzo entered, followed by Angelo and 2 men in federal badges, the prosecutor Lorenzo had mentioned, along with an FBI agent. Marco's face went white. Marco Colombo, the prosecutor said, you're under arrest for attempted bribery, solicitation of corporate espionage, and conspiracy to engage in illegal shipping activities. You have the right to remain silent. I watched them cuff him, his earlier confidence completely shattered, replaced by panic and rage. As they led him away, his eyes found mine. You played me, he said, disbelief in his voice. No, I corrected. You played yourself. I just provided the stage. After they left, Lorenzo pulled me into his arms, his body shaking slightly with released tension. It's over. It's finally over. Not quite, the prosecutor said, still present. We'll need Miss Romano's testimony, detailed documentation of all contact. And Mr. Greco, he turned to Lorenzo. This doesn't resolve our interest in your operations, but you've provided valuable assistance today. That will be noted. I'm sure it will, Lorenzo said neutrally. When we were finally alone in the restaurant's private dining room, Lorenzo and I simply held each other, the weight of the last 2 weeks finally lifting. You were brilliant, he murmured against my hair. Terrifying, but brilliant. I learned from the best. Now what? Now, I said, pulling back to meet his eyes. You keep your promise. Take me away somewhere safe and quiet, and we figure out what comes next. Together, he confirmed. Together. 3 months after Marco Colombo's arrest, I stood in Lorenzo's penthouse watching the city wake up, coffee in hand, wearing one of his shirts because mine were still in the dryer. This had become our routine, spending nights together, learning each other's rhythms, building something real in the aftermath of danger. But the fantasy couldn't last forever. We need to talk, Lorenzo said from behind me, his voice carrying a weight that made my stomach clench. I turned to find him dressed in a full suit, his expression carefully neutral, the face he wore when delivering bad news. That sounds ominous. It's realistic. He moved to the window beside me, both of us reflected in the glass against the city backdrop. The federal prosecutor is moving forward with a wider investigation into Mediterranean shipping operations. Marco's arrest opened doors they've been trying to access for years, and while I've cooperated, while I'm on the right side of most legal lines, there are complications. What kind of complications? The kind where associates I've worked with for decades are being subpoenaed, where legitimate business operations are being scrutinized for any hint of impropriety, where having a relationship with someone who was directly involved in bringing down Marco Colombo makes you a potential target for retaliation from his family. Understanding crashed through me. You're trying to push me away, again. I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Giuseppe Colombo is in prison, but he still has connections. His family is fractured but dangerous. And they know that you were instrumental in Marco's arrest. The threats against you have been handled by your security protocols. We've been through this, Lorenzo. New threats, credible ones. He pulled out his phone, showing me a report from Claudio. Surveillance photos of me leaving work, going to the gym, meeting Chiara for lunch. They've been watching you for 3 weeks. Systematic reconnaissance, the kind you do before making a move. Ice flooded through me. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was hoping we could neutralize the threat before you needed to know. But it's not working. They're too careful, too patient. And I won't risk your safety on hope. His jaw tightened. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to resign from your position as my assistant. I'm going to arrange for you to take a job at a consulting firm in Seattle. Legitimate, well-paid, completely unconnected to me. Claudio will escort you personally, ensure you're settled safely, and then you disappear from my life. I set down my coffee cup carefully, afraid I might throw it. That's your plan. Push me away, send me across the country, go back to your lonely existence managing threats alone. I'm protecting you. You're running away from the first real thing you've had in years because you're afraid. The words came out sharp, cutting. Because it's easier to be alone than to risk losing someone you care about. His expression cracked, pain bleeding through. I've lost everyone I've ever cared about, Julia. My mother died when I was 12. My father was killed when I was 16. My grandmother, the only person who believed I could be better, passed away 5 years ago. Everyone I love ends up hurt or dead because of what I am, what I do, the world I operate in. So your solution is to make sure you never love anyone again. My solution is to make sure you don't end up like them, to give you a chance at a normal life, away from this darkness. He moved closer, his hands framing my face with desperate gentleness. I love you, Julia. I love you so much it terrifies me. And because I love you, I'm letting you go. No. I caught his wrists, holding his hands against my face. You don't get to make this decision for both of us. You don't get to decide what I can handle, what risks I'm willing to take. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. Then explain it to me. Not the sanitized version. Not the protective half-truths. The real truth, Lorenzo. All of it. For a long moment, he simply looked at me. Then he stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides, and began to speak. My father ran one of the most violent operations in the city. Drug trafficking, weapons, protection rackets. Anything that made money, he touched. He was brutal, efficient, and completely without conscience. I watched him order executions before I was old enough to drive. I watched him break people physically and psychologically for minor infractions. And I was being groomed to take over, to become exactly like him. He moved to the window, staring out at the city. My grandmother, my mother's mother, saw what was happening. She took me aside when I was 14, after I'd witnessed something particularly violent, and she asked me who I wanted to be. Not who my father wanted, who I wanted. And I realized I didn't want to be him. I didn't want that legacy. What did you do? I studied. I learned legitimate business practices alongside the illegal ones. I made connections in legal circles, built relationships with people who operated above board. And when my father was killed, rival families, inevitable consequences of his methods, I took control and slowly, carefully began transitioning the operation. Divesting from the most violent activities, investing in legitimate businesses, building something that could exist in daylight. He turned back to face me. But you can't completely leave that world behind, Julia. The foundations I built on, the connections that gave me initial capital, the reputation that keeps rivals at bay. It's all rooted in darkness. I'm better than my father was, cleaner, more ethical within the constraints of this world. But I'm not good. I'll never be completely good. I don't need you to be good. I need you to be honest. Then here's honest. If you stay with me, you'll always be a target. Rivals will try to use you against me. Associates will question whether you're a vulnerability. Every time you leave the house, every time you meet a friend, every moment we're apart, I'll be calculating risks and deploying resources to keep you safe. Your life will never be completely your own, because it'll always be entangled with mine. I understand that. Do you? He moved closer again, intensity radiating from him. Do you understand that if Giuseppe Colombo's family comes after you, I will respond with overwhelming force? That I will do whatever it takes, including things that would horrify you, to keep you safe? That my love for you makes me more dangerous, not less, because I won't accept losing you? Yes, the word came out steady, certain. I understand all of that, and I'm still choosing to stay. Julia, no. Listen to me. I closed the distance between us, forcing him to meet my eyes. I've spent the last 3 months learning who you really are. Not the reputation, not the rumors, but the man who reads philosophy before bed, who calls his elderly associates on their birthdays, who rebuilt his father's violent empire into something with rules and ethics, who protected me without trying to control me, who trusted me to help handle Marco, when you could have just eliminated the threat. I took his hands in mine. I see all of you, Lorenzo Greco. The darkness and the light, the violence and the restraint, the man you were trained to be, and the man you chose to become instead. And I love all of it. So stop trying to protect me from yourself. If something happens to you because of me, then something happens. Life has risks, Lorenzo. Love has risks, but the alternative is spending our lives alone, safe but isolated, never taking the chance that something beautiful might come from something complicated. I squeezed his hands. I'm not running to Seattle. I'm not leaving you. And if Giuseppe Colombo's family wants to come after me, they'll discover that I have my own kind of strength. And I have you beside me. For a long moment, he simply held my gaze, war warring with himself, fear battling hope. Then something in him broke, or maybe healed, and he pulled me against him with desperate intensity. You're absolutely certain? His voice was rough against my hair. Because once you commit to this, once you're publicly known as mine, there's no taking it back. Your safety becomes my responsibility. Your life becomes entangled with everything I am. I'm certain. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But I have conditions. A slight smile tugged at his mouth. Of course you do. I'm not giving up my career. I'll transition from being your assistant to consulting independently, building my own client base. I need my own identity separate from being Lorenzo Greco's girlfriend. Agreed. And we make decisions together. Big ones. Life-altering ones. No more trying to protect me by making unilateral choices. Agreed. And when threats arise, because I understand they will, you tell me immediately. No more waiting. No more hoping you can handle it before I need to know. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. And one more thing. I took a breath. Eventually, when this settles, when the threats are managed and life achieves some kind of stability, I want a real future. Not just dating, not just a relationship we keep partially hidden. I want permanence, partnership, everything. Something in his expression softened completely. You're asking me to marry you, Miss Romano. I'm asking if you're capable of that level of commitment. If you can see a future where we're not just surviving threats together, but actually building a life. I can see it. His hands came up to frame my face. I've been seeing it for 3 months, afraid to say it out loud because acknowledging what I want, makes losing it more terrifying. But yes, Julia, when the time is right, when you're ready, I want everything with you. Partnership, permanence, a life that's ours. He kissed me then, and it felt different from all the other times. Not desperate or restrained, but certain. A promise sealed with contact, a future acknowledged and accepted. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Giuseppe Colombo's family. We need to address that threat directly. How? I meet with them, negotiate a truce, make it clear that harming you brings consequences they can't afford. His voice went cold, strategic. And if negotiation fails, I make an example that ensures no one else considers you a vulnerability. Lorenzo, I won't kill anyone who doesn't strike first, he said quickly. But I will make it economically and socially devastating to be my enemy. I'll freeze their assets, cut their business connections, make operating in this city impossible. They'll have to relocate or surrender. Those are the options I'm offering. And you think they'll accept those terms? They'll accept them because the alternative is worse. And because Giuseppe loved his son, despite everything. He won't risk more of his family for revenge against someone who was only protecting herself. Lorenzo's expression was grim, but determined. I'll handle this, Julia. I promise you, this threat ends. Permanently. The next 2 weeks were tense, filled with negotiations I wasn't privy to, but could see the evidence of in Lorenzo's tension, in the increased security presence, in the late-night phone calls conducted in Italian too rapid for me to follow. Then, finally, it was over. Giuseppe has agreed to terms, Lorenzo announced one evening, his shoulders finally relaxing. Complete withdrawal from any interest in you or our operations. His family relocates their base to Naples. In exchange, I release certain business territories back to his control and agree not to interfere with his operations as long as they stay within specified legal boundaries. Just like that? Just like that. He pulled me into his arms. He's tired, Julia. Tired of losing his operations, his son, his position in this city. He wanted an honorable exit, and I gave it to him. Sometimes the smartest move is letting your enemy retreat with dignity. Your grandmother would be proud. I hope so. His smile was soft, genuine. She'd like you, I think. Your strength, your refusal to be intimidated, your ability to see past reputation to the person underneath. She always said the right partner makes you braver and better simultaneously. That's what you do for me. You make me braver too. Scared sometimes, but brave. Good, because what comes next requires bravery from both of us. 6 months later, I stood in a small chapel surrounded by people who'd become family. Angelo, Claudio, Chiara, a handful of Lorenzo's closest associates who'd proven themselves loyal and trustworthy. The wedding was intimate, private, nothing like the elaborate society event Lorenzo could have arranged. This was just us, finally making permanent what had been building for years. As Lorenzo slid a ring onto my finger, platinum band, single diamond, elegant in its simplicity, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From professional distance to desperate kisses, from threats to triumphs, from two people carefully maintaining barriers to this moment of absolute commitment. I love you, he said, the words witnessed and official now. In this life and whatever comes after. You're mine, and I'm yours. Forever. Forever, I agreed. And when he kissed me, sealing vows that meant more than legal documents, I knew we'd found something rare, love that survived darkness, partnership built on truth, a future constructed from honesty and choice rather than convenience or necessity. The reception was held at Lorenzo's penthouse, intimate and warm, nothing like the cold spaces I'd first imagined his life contained. As I danced with my husband, that word still felt surreal and perfect. I caught glimpses of the life we were building together. Angelo toasting us with genuine warmth, his earlier skepticism about our relationship completely erased. Claudio actually smiling, rare and brief, but real. Chiara crying happy tears, thrilled that her friend had found something extraordinary in the most unexpected place. Happy? Lorenzo murmured against my ear as we swayed to music. Terrified and happy. Is that allowed? It's realistic. His arms tightened around me. This won't always be easy, Julia. There will be threats, complications, moments when we question this choice. I know. But we'll face them together. No more secrets, no more protection through distance. Just partnership. Real, messy, complicated partnership. That's all I've ever wanted. We danced until the city lights blurred below us, until the last guests departed, until it was just us in the space that was now ours. Not his penthouse, but our home, our life, our future. Later, as we stood by the windows watching dawn break over the city, Lorenzo pulled me against his chest, my back to his front, his arms wrapped around me possessively and protectively in equal measure. I promised you forever, he said quietly. I intend to keep that promise. Good, because I'm holding you to it. I'm counting on it. And as the sun rose on the first day of our marriage, on the beginning of whatever came next, I knew we'd found something worth every risk we'd taken. Love that had survived jealousy and danger, trust built through honesty and choice, a partnership that would face whatever darkness came with eyes open and hands joined. Together. Always together. Forever had started 3 years ago in a corporate office when I'd refused to be intimidated by a dangerous man's reputation. It had deepened through crisis and revelation, through fear overcome and trust earned. And now, standing in our home with my husband's arms around me, forever stretched ahead like a promise we'd keep making every day. Not because it was easy, but because we'd chosen each other, completely and without reservation, knowing exactly what that choice meant. And that made all the difference,